So good defense scales. It doesn't matter what tool. It shouldn't matter so much what tool, what exploit. Again, like they have to obey the laws of gravity. Attackers are not superhuman. They can't do superhuman stuff on a wire. That's what it's about.
That was Marcus Carey, and I'm Brian Boettcher. You're listening to a special episode of Breaking Down Security. In this episode, I'd like to share with you some of the recordings that I took when I attended Bsides Austin. I, along with Kate Brew, hosted a panel of security experts called Red Team versus Blue Team. So we had 3 red teamers, 3 blue teamers, kind of battling it out on, certain topics. We asked questions and we took questions from the audience. So it was pretty lively. On the panel were Josh Sokol, Mano Paul, Kevin Johnson, Michael Goff, Marcus Carey, Justin Whitehead, and Antonio Harais. Now I should mention that Antonio doesn't appear on this episode. He kind of tag team with Justin. They switched out, so he'll be on in the future. But yeah, it was great, and I thought, man, I need to record this, and because it's good content, and I hope you guys enjoy. Now, the first question Kate asked was, kind of define red team versus blue team, and here's what they had to say.
Blue team is basically the first and last line of defense against anybody trying to compromise your network. They're the guys who go into work all day long, running the IPS systems, monitoring logs, looking at malware, trying to remove infections, detect infections, basically trying to keep the bad guys out of the network and onto somebody else's network. That's the blue team.
Blue team, what does it mean? Incident response. So my job is not necessarily to defend against them breaking in, because I think everybody can be broken into, has been broken into. I think we should take the perspective of that we have been compromised, and I run my incident response thinking based on the fact we've been compromised, and to look for those anomalies from the bad guys to further improve the defenses. And my focus on blue team is detection and response, which helps lead to architecting better prevention. But for the most part, prevention is dead from a methodology of Infosec, in my opinion. We really need to focus on less compliance, give that to some analysts that just do paperwork, and deal with that PCI. Clint pointed out a really good point. Some of his clients who's given that cheat sheet to have said, but PCI does not require that. It's a failure of our community in Infosec. We've got to change. So blue teaming is assume you've been compromised, detect and respond, react, and improve your defenses. And that's my concept of blue teaming.
There's a big problem with how red teamers are presented and present themselves. It's something I'm going to talk about tomorrow, and it's something I'm going to talk about today, because I feel like there is a necessity for what we do. Of course, I'm biased, right? I'm a greedy capitalist, and if there wasn't a necessity for what I did, I wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage. But one of the things that we see a lot of times with the impression of red teamers is summed up very easily by a story when I was in an airplane. And I had this lady, and she was talking to me. It was a very nice conversation. So when she found out what I did, her reaction was immediately to stop talking to me. Just stopped, because I was an evil hacker, right? And we actually have lots of red teamers who revel, I think is the right word, in that mindset. Like, yes, I get to come in, tell you suck, and leave. We do, but that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to provide an understanding of the risks you actually face, not based on a vulnerability that has a logo and a name, but really based on we have that problem. And what does that problem mean? Because it's a completely different thing to say, I found SQL injection in your calendar app, than I found SQL injection in your calendar app, which co-hosts its database on the same database server as your HR app using the same credentials, right? Those are two very different things, and a red teamer is the one that should be able to tell you the difference. So that to me is what we do.
Okay, I'm going to take it from a little bit different idea of this. A lot of what I specialize in social engineering, I don't want to be the guy that you don't like. For me, red teaming has a lot to do with being able to go in and talk to somebody. A lot of our community doesn't like to do that so much. We have definitely a small group of introverts that would rather tweet while sitting in their hotel room than actually sit down here on the floor with you. I won't say that I did that at lunch while drinking a beer. But a lot of the red teaming that I see needs to be done. People are always going to be our weakest link. And I prey on that. I love the fact that I can walk in with a clipboard, say, I'm from the IT department, I'm here to help. And people will lead me to wherever I need to go. It's also fun when you can get the security guard to carry out the server for you, because I'm kind of chunky and lazy. I'm not going to lie about that. But so, I mean, what I want to kind of focus on today when we talk about some of this is the human aspect. Jason Street, who has actually been one hell of a mentor to me over the last 2 months while I've been trying to get talks together, and has given me a lot of insight and a lot of things, kind of said it best one time when he was, why are we like focusing so much on like bashing on our employees? No, we need to teach them to be the human IDS systems within our company. That old lady in HR who pretty much hates the computer and calls you every 45 minutes because she gets a spam email should be your star employee. She should be the one that you guys are saying, hey, this lady's doing one hell of a job. Yeah, she's a complete pain in the ass, but, you know, hey, she's the one that actually, she realizes she doesn't have a rich uncle living in Africa that just needs her bank account information. This is the stuff, like, how many people do click on that link? I only need you to click it once. I would definitely like to see a lot more of like the praise of the people who are pointing out the problems, and hopefully get to talk about that some today.
Again, it's Marcus over here. So what I think a red team is, I think that it's an analog for an attacker. I think that as a red teamer, you should you should imitate the attacks that an organization will face. You work with them to help them out, like Kevin said, whether it be social engineering. I kind of like the thing that I see that I kind of have a problem with red teamers is sometimes I think that there's I would say a white hat type red team assessment that sometimes we don't do a good job of imitating like nation state adversaries and stuff like that. So I think that we could do a better job from a red team perspective on imitating things that are actually happening and how people are actually getting pillaged, and you know, using those nation state attackers, some of their IOCs. Maybe I've played around with like Chinese malware on networks and stuff like that. So I think that we should try to make it more real, because I think that sometimes what happens is we have this whole methodology that's a white hat hacker style that doesn't do companies any good, because that's not what they're really facing. So I think that from a red team perspective, we could actually imitate the people that are actually killing our country and stealing all our intellectual property better. And sometimes I think we get down in the weeds and try to be too cool, and that's kind of a disservice to customers. That's what I think about red teams.
And then I stepped in with my first question. What makes a good pen test? What makes one actionable and valuable to an organization?
From my experience, when I used to work for one of the large computer manufacturers over here in the Austin area, you know, which rhymes with heaven and I used to work with Dell, and it's a great company. I used to enjoy my time over there. My experience was to actually make sure that bad guys do not get in and break our defenses. And as part of the whole pen testing process, one of the things that we would find is the fact that we would have external and internal pen tests done, and the result of it would be a report that would be very non-tractionable within the company itself because of either policies in place or not enough processes in place. What we also did find was the fact that those results were mostly a regurgitation of vulnerabilities without it really translating into business risk. And so from that standpoint, what really would make a pen test useful for blue teamers is the fact that don't tell me exactly how the thing was broken into or how you got in, but also tell me what your opinion is. Now, it need not be something that we would have to absolutely follow to the letter within the company, but we at least have some guidelines. Now, I would also add to the fact that we then ended up having to actually do cross-functional training and get our defenders on the attacker's side. And so it's really not a pure, clear-cut red team, blue team kind of approach, as opposed to actually having a mixed approach to addressing the problem itself. So then the results actually became much more effective because now I knew as to how they broke in, but I also have now a plan in place to be able to defend so that we don't get broken in again in that same way.
From a red team perspective, it always makes me laugh when people say we keep people from breaking into our networks. I think that's actually funny to me because I think that Michael mentioned before that I think that from a lot of times I know people like friends like Dave Kennedy. His company only does full scope pen tests. They will not do anything if they don't have social engineering or everything a part of it. I think that sometimes companies what they do is they tie the hands of the penetration tester, tie the hands of the red team. They only want certain things done, and so I think that it should just be free for all pretty much on some penetration tests. I believe in black box tests, the testing one thing out. But what I see a lot of times is I see people limiting, like everything's out of scope. I mean, it's like ridiculous, like doing a pen test sometimes, where you're just limited to like doing trivial stuff. And so I think that a lot of times if you focus too if your focus is too narrow, they're developing a new application. Hey, we want that application tested, but all of our other network is totally secure already. We already keeping people from breaking in. I think that's a big problem for a lot of companies. And so they pay for a pen test and they try to tell you what they want and what their expectations are. But in reality, somebody's going to phone them in a totally different way than what they're doing this threat model. Somebody's going to destroy them, and it's kind of sad.
There is actually a use for those limited scope pen tests, and that is when they. Oh, and I'm saying that I know you know this. I'm just saying it out here because I do some of those limited scope pen tests when a customer has a new app they're concerned about. But we always stress when we do a limited scope pen test that it doesn't mean they're secure. If a customer ever says to me, I don't want you to test the rest of your network because it's secure, I laugh and correct them. But I do have a number of my customers who will come to me and say, I have this app that needs to be tested and here's why. And in those cases, and I know, like I said, I know you know that there is a purpose. As long as the customers understand why that scope is okay. And that ties directly to something I think is a big problem in security anyways. And that is most people don't know why they do it, right? The why behind things is so much more critical in my mind than I need this done. I don't care how you do it, understand why you do it. An example I give always is I had a developer and we showed him the stereotypical SQL injection, single quote, take or 1 = 1, semicolon, and this guy freaked out because he didn't understand why Oracle made a function of 1 = 1. And totally didn't understand the why, and a pen test for that guy is useless.
So piggybacking on what he's talking about, and he kind of validates what I'm talking about here in a sense. His first when Kevin gave his intro, what he talked about is kind of how bad can it get? Yeah, I broke this system, and this is how I broke the system. But how bad can it get after that? Can I escalate privileges? Can I have lateral movement throughout your network? Can I totally devastate password reuse, whatever, right? So the problem is this, right? If you told somebody, hey, break this application, and you break the app, they might be like, well, we're not really worried about that because the rest of our network is secure. Yeah, you got into it. We're not going to fix anything. That's a low risk. We're good. That's what happens when you don't do a full scope intrusion. So yeah, start off with, how bad can it get after you get that initial foothold on the network. So I'm like full scope all the time.
The limited scope, from my perspective, of assume you're compromised can be very valuable. I would call it a purple team test or a detect and response test. I'm going to give you the credentials to a box. I'm going to let you get into it, and then I'm going to challenge you to get from point A to point B, non-destructive testing, to test my blue team capabilities. And I want you to document what you're going to do on the red team. I did this, I did an XP command shell, I launched this command shell, I launched bsexec, whatever. Capture those to-dos and then compare it to what I caught. So from that perspective, a limited scope thing I think is incredibly valuable. And I would say from my blue team experience and former consulting experience, HP and others, I'd rather have that kind of pen test than any other. Now take that back a step to Mano's side. Web app security is much different than what I'm talking about. I can do web app logs, but I do need this other capabilities of blue team that has to be addressed, but it is a difference. So that limited scope, I think, is high value just on doing that limited web app scope. And so I think they have their place, but I also agree on a full-blown, Dave Kennedy kind of scenario. But I really think for cost, for budget, limited scope stuff, high value in return if you're focusing on detect and response.
So I'm going to say that there's no point in testing something that you already know is broken, right? So that's one reason to limit the scope. So, if I know that my users are going to click on that email when they get, why would I pay somebody to come and actually test that? Two, the other reason why you would want to limit the scope is because you're trying to limit the effects of the pen test on production environments. So most of us, we're not, our business is not pen test, our business is not defense of hackers, our business is business, right? And so for my company, I'm trying to make sure that these guys aren't breaking things that are actually earning us money. So that's why we have to limit the scope of the pen test.
I'm sorry.
No, you just don't break my shit. So the
hackers would never do that.
In terms of why is a pen test useful, I think that there's two reasons why it's useful. The first one is it serves as a benchmark for improvements or lack thereof year over year, or however often you do your pen test. So we do hire outside parties to come in, pen test our systems, and the goal is, let's look at the results this year, let's look at the results last year. Did we fix the stuff that was broken? If so, we're doing a pretty good job. Is there more stuff that showed up? Okay, that kind of sucks. So we're using it as a benchmark to try and figure out, are we doing better or worse than we have in the past? And then the other reason why a pen test is useful is that it emulates an attack scenario. It tests your incident response processes. So if you know that somebody's going to be doing the pen test and you're paying somebody to do your pen test, don't just sit and wait for stuff to break. Monitor your logs, look at what's going on in your environment, look at the IDS, the IPS system, see if there's things that you could have used to detect what they're doing and even shut it down, right? Mike talked about the whole purple team test. That should be what you're doing as part of the purple team, is communicating with them saying, hey, we saw you guys doing that and we blocked it. That is the idea behind actually doing the pen test. That's why it's useful.
So on one hand, you say, I don't need to pay somebody if I know something is broken. But then on the other hand, you say, I need to know what will happen, so I need to monitor and everything else like that. You don't pay me to test to see whether somebody will click a link. As I'm sure everybody here will say, people click shit. 100%. You're paying me to tell you what I was able to do after they clicked shit. And that's the problem with those limited scope saying, and I'm not saying, I don't know that you're saying this, but so many people say to us, I know that's broken, I know it's vulnerable, there's no reason for you to test it. Yet if you dig into it, they have no idea what that vulnerability means, right? And that's bad.
I agree with Josh on one thing, though. I like the idea of doing a incident response process. A lot of companies I've seen a lot of organizations, they sit back and just watch you totally pillage their network. And yeah, they don't, yeah, some people are fan of the red team. Oh yeah, break everything, hack, drink all the booze, hack all the things. So they just so it's critical due to that incident response.
Last question.
Before I take a question, I just want to add and clarify the fact that as any sensible blue teamer would know, you never actually paint a picture that we are 100% secure. That is just impracticality. It doesn't happen. That's a utopian concept. So from that standpoint, we know that we have a calculated risk that we need to work with. Having said that, I have to respectfully disagree with my brother Marcus that a full scope penetration test does not mean a free-for-all penetration test. So if you have it in scope, now it's important for you to define the scope in the very beginning of the pen test itself. From that standpoint, then if there are extensions of that scope that need to be in place, which says, as a result of me compromising a particular application or an asset, whether it's a host or a network within that company itself, do I expand that to explore other areas? Now, if that is defined within the scope, well and good. In many cases, you're also going to find the fact that you're going to find other jewels that are out there as a pen tester, and you're going to say, am I going to go after it? Having said that, no matter what the case is, you still will have to have a structured process to follow to get out of jail card, the necessary redefinition of scope. And so that's the point that you need to make it very clear with the engagements that pen testing still is something that is well controlled, and it's not just a free for all. If I could use the word cowboys and Indians, right? And I'm an Indian, so I know. So you're not going around shooting people, but and I went and actually looked up that phrase, cowboys and Indians, and actually cowboys have a very structured process. They have rodeos and things like that, so it's not an unstructured thing. And we live in Texas, so you guys should know that, right? So, sorry, I had to put that in, sir.
So I've got a lot more with the panel, but I'd like to close out this episode of Breaking Down Security with a discussion I had with one Marcus Carey. After the talk, we kind of met each other in the hall, started talking, and I said, man, I didn't get to ask you this one question that I had just for you. And he was like, well, what was it? And I said, well, maybe we can find a place where we can record. And so here it is. My first question to him was, this whole initiative to encrypt the internet, what are your thoughts on that?
So my opinion on crypto is grossly misused and grossly misunderstood. So those people all over the world screaming for crypto, they're security developers and security, not even developers, it's security people at the masses are screaming for crypto and everything. I don't believe everything needs to be encrypted. Probably 99% of what you do on the internet doesn't need to be encrypted.
I do a Google search. Shouldn't that be encrypted?
I mean,
I'm
playing devil's
typing
advocate.
in poodle breeds or something, or
Yeah, I don't think that stuff needs to be encrypted. I mean, you can use crypto if you want to, but I don't believe in encrypt everything by default. I'm not paranoid at all. I'm not paranoid that the government's snooping at me.
But a lot of people are. They don't want them to know that, okay, I'm researching some rare disease on the internet. Hey, there's a chance that me or a family member might have that disease. All of a sudden, my insurance rate goes up.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like I think that's unjust paranoia. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
I think that, and if people want to spy on you, they're going to spy on you. So you can only control things. You should only worry about things that are under your control. Mm-hmm. For the most part, I think that if we start worrying too much about other people, that causes problems. People talk about Infosec burnout all the time. I think that is because a lot of people want to force their beliefs on other people. Like if you think, if you think that everybody needs to be secure, everybody needs to do this and that, that's kind of like your opinion.
Right.
Only thing we can do as a security professional is tell people, hey, look, I think you should do this. I recommend this, that, and the third. And that's it. We can just tell them what to do. You go into a doctor tells you you're overweight, right? You need to eat this, this, and that, right? The doctor gave you his advice. It's up to you whether you want to take that advice or not. Mm-hmm. The doctor's not going to cry. He's just going to go home to his wife, go home to his kids. They're not going to be concerned. So I think a lot of this stuff we end up worrying about all this stuff. This should be encrypted. How long passwords should be on a website. I see people ranting at people because, oh, I don't like their password policy. Well, don't use their stuff, ranting about all kind of ridiculous stuff. Their password's not long enough. Their password didn't let me do this certain special character, emoticon is my password or something. People be worrying about the wrong stuff. There's plenty of things that we can make an impact on that we should be concentrating on.
Okay, give me some examples. Rather than trying to encrypt the internet. Right?
Rather than trying to encrypt the internet. A good example of stuff that you can control. Are you patching all the systems that you can on your network?
Yeah.
Or like a mad person. Are you something as simple as that? I think that the rule. I mean, are you enforcing egress filtering? Can an attacker steal data at any port? Right? Are you detecting lateral scanning on your network? Stuff like that. Stuff that is somewhat achievable as a security person and a security organization. Are you doing the basic, what they would call in football, the basic blocking and tackling to give yourself that home field advantage as far as from a security perspective? Like, we'll complain about all this other stuff, and people be ranting on Twitter about stuff. But while you're ranting, and I rant a lot, but I've realized it's not productive. I could be actually building solutions instead of ranting. And so that's where I kind of I put most of my energy now is trying to build stuff that actually solves the problem.
I noticed those two examples you gave. Those are pretty easy to implement. Those two things, lateral movement, the east-west movement detection, and the egress filtering, that's a firewall solution right there.
Yep.
Yeah. So those are relatively easy.
And there's tons of more. There's tons of more things like that that people can do on their network, and they're just not implementing it.
Yeah.
For instance, I worked with some really smart people, and one of my bosses, we weren't at NSA, but I worked at NSA. She worked at NSA. She was brilliant. Things taking away default admin from everybody, where you still have organizations where everybody's an administrator. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you get compromised at that administrative privilege, that gives you the keys to the kingdom in many cases. So even implementing stuff like least privilege, and these concepts have been around since the Orange Book. Old school security, first security papers talked about you need to know least privilege, all these things. People should be implementing VLANs. There's still plenty of networks and companies that aren't implementing any kind of separation. And from there you can detect people doing crossing across layer 3 devices. Whether there's a firewall in the way. So tons and tons of stuff that people can be implementing or trying to move forward on implementing, but a lot of times we're worried about zero-day attacks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And what I think about zero-day attacks is it doesn't matter how an attacker attacks your network. All of the things that happen after that have to obey the laws of internetworking. It's like the laws of gravity. I have to walk on Earth. I'm not going to be floating floating into the clouds. I'm not going to fly tomorrow by myself. So an attacker gets on your network. It doesn't matter how they did it, social engineering, USB drop, whatever. That attacker still has to abide by the laws of internetworking. If they want to steal data off the network, they're going to have to connect by IP addresses. They probably are going to use DNS. They're probably going to be doing internal scanning on your network. They're probably going to be trying to see what holes are in your internet, your internet infrastructure. Can I get past their firewall? Is their firewall doing egress checks? Can I get out on some random port, 4242 that they're not monitoring?
All that's noisy, right?
So it does make an impact. So if I'm scanning for egress, you should absolutely be able to pick that up. So, so my whole take on it is that we know a lot of things that we can do, and the things I'm talking about don't require some huge capital investment. most of the time, right?
Yeah.
But instead of doing the things that we should be doing, we're fighting battles to procure $1 million equipment. Some of these things cost more than $1 million, several $100,000 in some cases. They're fighting to get that stuff. I would rather hire 2 people. If a product costs $250,000, I'd probably rather hire 3 people and get them up to speed.
And it's not so much the capital expense; it's the operational expense too that'll get a company. When you say $1 million
Mm-hmm.
for the equipment, you got to add another $1 million for the people. Or
check this out. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And so what I see a lot is I see instances where the security team spends more time trying to actually maintain the security device, configure it, monitor it. Oh, it's messed up. We need to patch this. So security people, security professionals, quote unquote, they end up being people that are system administrators of security tools.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to defend the network and try to do the basic blocking and tackling, they're actually maintaining and having to try to maintain these security tools.
Yeah.
Case in point, I worked at an organization where they bought a security tool. This tool cost millions of dollars. The tool never worked before. It never worked. They ignored the tool. But the security company they bought it from still had a services contract on it. The guy used to come every month, and he used to just sit down, did nothing, and then he left.
And
so a lot of people have that going on the network. They're buying software. The software doesn't work. The person that sold it to them are still eating. It's sad, man.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, bro.
Well, maybe they had to buy it to get past an audit. That happens too.
That's ridiculous.
We got more money than sense, but we have to pass this audit in the next week. We got to buy this device and tell the auditor we're getting this device, and he says, "Okay, you guys should be good once you install it." So I've seen that happen too.
That's hilarious, right? That's funny to me.
Yeah.
It's sad.
So a box is compromised, and for an attacker, the rest of the network is kind of a black box. So they have to create some traffic, and you said the laws.
Yeah. So when we talk about like the basic attack, a lot of people have this whole attack methodologies and whatnot, where there's reconnaissance, there's attack, there's entrenchment, there's exfiltration, abuse, all that stuff. There's a cyber kill chain, all that stuff.
Right.
So
you aspire to that cyber kill chain?
Well, I think it has value. I think it has value to be able to detect at certain levels. I mean, I think it makes sense. I've been talking so much. What was the original question? What was the original thought on that one?
On this one, a box is compromised, and then he.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
It's like a black box.
I know I was going.
How does an attacker?
Yeah.
Make his next move,
Yeah.
and how do you detect that?
Yeah. So that whole life cycle or that develop. I mean, it's like any kind of loop. So attacker research you. He's gonna scan you, or he's gonna do OSINT or phish you, whatever. So he's gonna attack. Then he's gonna do what he has to do, entrench himself, and he's gonna then at that point he's gonna do some abuse, maybe steal creds on that machine, whatnot, maybe steal what he can. And then what he's going to do is he's going to start that cycle up again. He's going to do reconnaissance again. He's reconning the internal network, right? And he's going to attack the internal network, entrench himself again on more systems, steal stuff from that machine, and then he's going to do more recon over and over and over and over on the network. So it's a cyclical approach, and you have to be able to catch people with some of those things. And like you said before, it's somewhat noisy if you're listening to the right things. So we just have to be able to catch them in that pattern all the time. Just that's kind of how you have to win the game. Like everybody says by now, and I said yesterday when I was on the panel that I laugh when people say, I prevent people from hacking into my network.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. Okay.
Well, you try to prevent people.
Exactly. It's a best kit. It's a best what a best guess, or not best guess, even a best effort kind of thing. It's like you try your best, but you and it's not. People shouldn't get on emotional when they get owned either. So it should. And I hate the press cycle is ridiculous. Everybody's getting quoted in the press. All the vendors are getting quoted. Well, they should have did this, and then you look at you look at the Twitter sphere. Oh, they didn't even salt their passwords. They didn't blah blah blah. So man, everybody's doing something jacked up on the network. Nobody's network is 100% secure. There's no such thing as 100% security, and there never will be. So it's just like it's kind of funny how and sometimes what you would say we victim shame people to get attacked.
That's right.
And so it's just a weird industry sometimes. It's a weird community sometimes, but it's kind of weird how this stuff sometimes works.
So, what's your favorite hack? If you're an attacker, this is like it's in your back pocket, right? In fact, it's in your front. You got it holstered, right? It's ready to go. It almost always works. You know everything about it.
Well, I think that and I'm a big fan of doing. If there's a red team assessment, big fan of being able to imitate the actual adversaries that are causing damage.
You're talking about being realistic in today's.
Yeah, absolutely. So phishing is very realistic. Some of the nation states, that's how they get in all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about this yesterday on the panel as well, where there's white hat hackers that have white hat techniques. These techniques are sometimes used by nation states, but a lot of times the white hats just imitate each other. So white hat attack is just a repetition of using the same tools, and we all know what the tools are. Using those tools, this tool, that tool, because everybody else does it, and it's cool. What happens though is that all the security vendors, they tailor their tools towards the white hat stuff because that's what they get their hands on most of the time. There are some high-end vendors, some vendors that actually have really good threat intel, quote unquote. But from a white hat perspective, most of those attacks aren't using that stuff. They're not using that malware, and there's a good case in that. I mean, you don't trust the malware, but at least try to make it look like the real people that's attacking you.
Yeah.
And don't, so, you can defend yourself against a white hat maybe, because it's funny that like even stuff like, Metasploit, for instance, all the vendors detect Metasploit, a lot of Metasploit stuff, and they looking for Metasploit.
They're looking for those signatures.
Yeah. So they build their tool around defending white hats. That's crazy. You feel me?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you're doing it wrong. Why, so good defense scales. It doesn't matter what tool. It shouldn't matter so much what tool, what exploit. Again, like, they have to obey the laws of gravity. Attackers are not superhuman. They can't do superhuman stuff on a wire.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about.